Hello and welcome to my newest addition to my video family. My name is Stephen, Dr. Stephen Hairfield. I've been studying the field of metaphysics for a very long time in my life. I've also been a big fan uh, of ancient prophecy, and I'm also somewhat of an amateur geologist. And of course, being involved in the field of metaphysics, of course, that's the study of cause. Today's video that I'd like to share with you, in a sense, is going to be my predictions for the rest of this year. I've done them historically, and they've all been right in there as far as the accuracy goes. I'm going to say 75%. Except this time I'm going to do it different. I'm going to attempt to share with the viewer and listener what I feel deeply is going on in the world, human consciousness, human behavior. And what I'd like to do is keep my focus pretty much on that. In fact, I'd like to call this axis shift of the ages, because it's going to involve all of us, the entire world. Ladies and gentlemen, ancient prophecy says to us that our society, our world, is going to go from a patriarchal way of living to a matriarchal. Does that mean that feminine is going to be in charge? For heaven's sakes, it'll at least be different from what we've experienced so far, so I'm all for that. But no, I don't think it's that, because the idea of matriarchal and patriarchal can fit almost virtually anywhere. Just as a few quick examples. Water is considered matriarchal, land is patriarchal. Air, atmosphere, that's matriarchal. Earth is patriarchal. Our left brain is patriarchal. Our right brain is matriarchal. Our emotions are matriarchal. Our soul is matriarchal. Our physical form is patriarchal. And even when we look at the poles, the magnetic poles, the North Pole is considered patriarchal. The South Pole is considered matriarchal. Why is all that important? Look at the human experience. Look at how things have been changing and getting more dynamic over the last several years, but especially since 2006. What's actually going on is the energetic fields of our planet are beginning to change and shift. And we have to remember, according to ancient knowledge, we are always energy first. And when energy shifts and changes, that means we shift and change with it. And here's the interesting thing. We don't have any choice about that. We're going to have our experiences. Let's say that we are going into a matriarchal world. Do you realize the impact of how you behave is going to be? If not, I think you ought to take a moment to consider that. Why? Because we are so used to, in our modern societies, operating out of our left brain idea, our analytical side. And yet that's patriarchal. Well, what happens to the mind and the thought process if we indeed do end up going into a matriarchal society? How are we going to think? What's that going to appear like? In fact, you can look into ancient prophecy and it tells us many things. That the constellations in the night sky, you will see differently, different positions, and that's written in more than one place. Have any of you noticed that the stars in the sky at night have shifted their position somewhat? And have you noticed the sun also is rising and setting in different positions? There is something to that. That being said, if we look at the idea of geology, how can you ever explain the fact, and it is a known archaeological fact, that some of the best fossil finds for tropics are actually found in places like Indiana? Now, how can Indiana be below the equator? And then you take a look at the idea of the frozen mammoths that they have found in recent years, over the last 20 maybe. They had undigested vegetation not only in their mouth, but in their intestine. What in the world would a woolly mammoth be doing in the Arctic Circle in the first place, seeing as how they were vegetarian? Why would they be there? Or did the Arctic Circle go to them? Speaking of which, I don't know if you're aware of it, but according to the information that I've been gifted, that the North Pole so far in the last 6 months has moved a total of 161 miles, and that it's picking up speed, and it's moving at over an average of a mile a day. What are the implications of that? What are the ramifications of that? Well, if the North Pole is patriarchal and our left brain is patriarchal, then that means that's going to change. That's going to change in how we think, keeping in mind that we are energy first. And as already shared with you, as energetic fields shift and change, So does human. So does human consciousness. So does human being. So does human behavior. Ladies and gentlemen, as we move from the dynamics that we've known for so many hundreds and thousands of years and shift into a new direction, we have to understand that how we do things and how we operate, even with and towards each other, is going to take on a different dynamic. And it's my intent to help us understand that. Because you see, I think a lot of that shifting is actually going to increase this year. In fact, one of the few predictions I'm going to give on Mother Nature, which there are only going to be three. And here's the first one. Our weather patterns, they are getting so unpredictable. Did you know that Denmark just had its first hurricane ever recorded? And we had a tornado last month in the middle of May. That was one that had never been recorded in modern history. An EF5, winds of over 300 miles an hour. And it was 2.6 miles wide and was on the ground without lifting off for over 40 miles, unheard of. Ladies and gentlemen, I think our weather pattern beginning next month is going to become violent. And then, yes, I'm saying violent, and that's globally, not just here in the United States. We're going to be seeing even more flooding in places like we do not ordinarily see them. The next thing I'm going to say is I think the northeastern United States had better be aware and braced for the idea of a tsunami. The North Atlantic Ridge, according to U.S. Geological Survey, is getting a lot more active. And I would say that by what I sense and feel, the northeastern United States could experience a very large tsunami before this summer is over. Now think about that, before this summer is over. But as I said in the very beginning, I'm going to spend the vast majority of my time talking with you about the human experience and the human condition. You've heard me say in the historical videos that I have here on YouTube that whatever you're tempted to do in this world, you're going to be overpowered by it and you're going to carry it out. But the interesting thing is, does it have to be violent? Does it have to be rage? Does it have to be anger? Does it have to be deceit and all the negative ideas that we humans have the tendency to carry around with us? And by the way, those negative ideas also happen to be patriarchal. So in a dynamic where we switch from patriarchal to matriarchal, that would automatically imply that all of the negative thoughts and views that we have are going to dissipate and disappear. And that's one of the things that I think is going on now. You see, for those negative ideas to be removed from our reality, they have to be seen first. They have to be known first. They have to be understood so that they can be shifted. And I think we're going to be experiencing on an individual level a lot more of that. Have you been feeling lethargy lately? Have you been feeling like you have no drive, no real desire? Those are all parts of these types of changes. Are you missing blocks of time? If so, you're okay. It's part of the process. It's as we shift from that left brain logic to right brain. And if you'd like to understand more about that, a wonderful lady out there by the name of Jill Bolte Taylor has a wonderful book, My Stroke of Insight. I would suggest that you read it because she lost the use of her left brain for a period of 8 years. And she came to an incredible understanding because of those events, and we're all going to travel that same path. Are you waking up early in the morning? Do you feel edgy? Do you feel as though something is about to happen? When I ask that question, most people always say yes, and it feels like that it's going to be very soon. You see, as our polarities change and our thinking styles change, and we begin to move from the patriarchal idea of logic into the matriarchal side of our brain, that means we become more aware, we become more sensitive. I mean, after all, ancient prophecy tells us we're going to go from a three-dimensional reality into a fourth and maybe even a fifth dimension. What are those? And how will we operate with those? You see, here's something else to consider. As our brain begins to operate differently, I would have to believe that also so does our visual cortex. How we see things is also going to change. So you see, as we become finer in our being, which is matriarchal, then it's going to also end up taking us less effort. But ladies and gentlemen, we've got quite a journey in front of you, in front of all of us, actually. When Edgar Casey, one of the greatest modern prophets, I guess you could say, was asked, why did he move his family from Ohio to Virginia Beach? His first response is that because Virginia Beach was going to become subtropical. Oh, no, now, wait a minute. You're saying Virginia is going to go below the equator? Well, if the state of Indiana was at one point, I suppose Virginia could too. We don't realize the dynamics that actually take place during a time of magnetic changes or polar shifts or shift of the axis. There's no one alive today that has ever experienced that. And by the way, it usually occurs at a rate of about every 25,000 years. So we are coming to the close of a couple of cycles. One is a 5,000 year cycle and the other is a 25,000 year cycle. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not going to sit here and say to you, the world is going to end. No, I don't believe that. And I have never said that and never will. What it's going to do is evolve. In fact, if we look at everything going on in our world today, the conflicts, the unrest, the moves against power, whether it's against a government or a corporation, it really doesn't matter. It's because we are outgrowing these ideas, that we are expanding into greater levels of our own being. It has always been said by me that we were intended to operate and live as divine creatures, and we haven't achieved that yet. And I do feel that one of the things that's going to be created by this shift of the ages is going to be a great number of us, in fact, everybody that's here, is going to achieve that level of being. And it's going to be a very interesting period that we're going to be going through. I'm going to say it could be as far out as the next 18 months, but I feel it's closer than that. I feel it could be anywhere between July and into October of this year. We're going to see huge increases in the odd behavior of humankind. And when I say odd behavior, I'm actually being a little bit low key. And the reason I say that is, once again, whoever a person inside is actually, how they actually are, let's say, just as an example, they happen to be a deceptive person, there's going to become a point where they are not going to be able to, let's say, hide that any longer. It's going to have to be exposed. So one, they recognize it, they realize it, and they have the opportunity to change it. If they don't take that opportunity to change it, then their future may be somewhat, let's just say, changed radically. And that's not to say all of our futures aren't going to be changed radically. I mean, the world that we're headed to is going to be one of huge magnificence, but the path to get there is going to be one of the most intriguing things of all. As I've shared with you historically, that um, as the magnetics go, so do human. As the energetics go, so does human. So you see, we are being taken out of our routine. In fact, when you really look at the weather dynamics of today, they defy our comprehension. A hurricane in Denmark, think about that. Think about where that's located. It's way up in the northern hemisphere. Historically, it's always been said that there's no way a hurricane could go there because the waters are too cold. Well, excuse me, either the waters have warmed up, or what we've always thought and the way that it all operates is changing, becoming a different dynamic. In fact, you could even say, to a great extent, weather today to even predict is getting very difficult at best. And the reason, once again, is the shifting of these magnetic fields. I get so tired sometimes of hearing all these governments talking about global warming. If global warming is true and that we are the cause of that, then let me ask you something. Why is it that 25,000 years ago, 50,000 years ago, 75,000 years ago, and on, why do we show global warming in our polar ice caps when they take ice core samples? Why is that? I can't explain that. I don't know. I wasn't around 25,000 years ago. I'm here now. But we also know that these magnetic fields have changed a minimum of 171 times in the history of our world. I say a minimum because they're still counting. That was the last count. And the way that they can count that is that the magnetics of the geology is different at different levels. So if the magnetics are different, then that means the poles are in different places. That would also imply to me that there's no such thing as a global ice age. That's just what we've been taught to believe. Why? Because of glacial activity, literally all over the world. Well, think about something. If the poles have moved 171 times, wouldn't it make sense that the odds of the North and South Pole being in different positions on our planet would have taken place? That might explain the idea of glacial activity. It might. I don't know. But what I am saying is our behavior is deeply being affected and how we interact with each other. You see, to me, even another thing that you could say, I've read in 3 different places, one in the biblical text, it says this: there will be 2 on the road, one will be taken, one will be left. In Middle Eastern texts, it says there will be 2 in the field, one will be taken, one will be left. Also in the biblical text, earlier text, Old Testament, it says there will be 2 in the bed, one will be taken and one will be left. And in Tibetan text, it says there will be 2 in the mill, one will be taken and one will be left. Well, that can only mean one of 3 things. The first would be that half of our world is going to be eliminated as far as humans go. Do I think that? I hope not. The second thing it could mean, it means that our soul no longer needs form to operate in. That would also possibly explain that. But another one, and maybe a little more obscure one, would simply be this: that the idea of separation becomes removed, and we recognize and understand the idea of oneness and that we're all interconnected. We all are the same internally, just externally we look a little bit differently. You see, when we come to that idea, and by the way, that's one of the things that Jill Bolte Taylor pointed out in her book, My Stroke of Insight, that's what she felt like, that everything was operating as one and the same thing. She recognized herself and, yes, everything around her. So you see, in these shift of the ages that's going on, it is indeed going to not only affect our minds and how we think, but it's also impacting our behavior. An example, look at how erratic human behavior has become, and it's even going to get more so. And then there's going to become that tipping point. Where that is, we don't know. But we do know, if we look in the book of Revelation, you would read this phrase: there will be 3 days of darkness. Well, that could be a couple of things. One, it could be that very literally it's going to be dark for 3 days. I'm not so sure about that one. And of course, it could also mean that war happens and the sky gets covered in smoke and ash. I'm hoping that doesn't occur either. But with erratic human behavior, there is always that possibility. Or it could mean this last thing: that as we shift from left brain functionality, dominant functionality, to right brain dominant functionality, then there's going to be a period of adjustment that we're each going to have to make in how we're going to operate with this new way the mind functions. That could easily explain the idea of 3 days of darkness. You could say in the field of psychology that that's 3 days of, we'll just say, temporary potential insanity, if it comes to that. I'm not sure it'll do that either. I myself, I asked earlier if people were missing blocks of time. I'm missing a total of 9 hours. Everybody around me said I was fine. Everybody said I was holding conversations and being myself, but personally, I don't know where I was. And I even asked after the 9 hours was up, how have I been? And I was told I was fine. Everything was normal, but not internally. So I've experienced slight levels of that, and I've had the opportunity to speak with people around the world that have also. The longest one was missing a full 24 hours. So that, to me, would explain the idea of 3 days of darkness. Um, and after we come out of that is how we will operate as the optimum creature. You see, in the long run, I'm going to share with you what I feel it's going to gift us: a matriarchal society, a society of peace, a place where there's no real necessity of governments. Elders, guiding sources, yes. Governments, no. I don't feel there's going to be any idea of illness, conflict, disagreement, that everybody will operate in one idea as that divine human. But it's that path we're going to take to get there. I ask everybody to do yourselves a favor. Take the ideas of patriarchal and matriarchal and see how far reaching they are. Learn to realize that that whole idea has an infinite ability. Because you see, to myself, I was taught when I was a monk in northern India, that if it's a universal principle, then if it fits in one place, It will always fit everywhere. And the idea of matriarchal and patriarchal, it does. So if it fits everywhere, then that means the impact of a matriarchal society is going to be huge because it's going to literally impact everything in how we do things, how we share, how we communicate, all aspects of us. Now, that being said, is there anything to fear over this? No, not necessarily, because fear isn't going to do you any good anyway. Because when this occurs, how it occurs is up to the universe. Once more, I say to you, no one alive today has ever experienced this, but we are in the midst of it, and we're going to see it continue to increase and grow. We are in an arena of a huge human evolutional leap because of the shifting dynamics of our world. A peaceful place shall be ours, one of kindness, compassion, and being is headed right for us. It's just simply be willing to let go of how you've always done things. Learn your routine. Learn to operate more from your sensitive nature instead of your logical, ego-based mindset. That's not going to help you. Thank you. You can check me out by visiting my website at www.hairfield.com. You can email me at stephen@hairfield.com. I'm also on a radio show I do weekly on Insight Radio Network on Blog Talk Radio. They're every Wednesday evening, 6:30 Pacific. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm an author. I talk about some of this in one of my latest books, in a metaphysical interpretation of the Bible. Thank you for watching the video and the other ones that I've put on here for you. And looking forward to hearing. Thank you.